do a little update on Miss Rarely Wrong. And we're finally maybe getting out of the woods. Her blood work, when we last pulled a CBC chem just to look at changing her supplements, we discovered that she had some major issues with her liver. And that was a few months ago. This has been going on. And her blood work is finally looking better. She's been on a protocol of extra dewormers and antibiotics, but not really knowing why the liver was so off, but it was definitely off. So she's finishing up her antibiotics. She's gone through her deworming. We've been pulling blood regularly, and she's on Banamine regularly. And finally, her blood work is starting to show some improvements. So even though Rarely looks worse, she seems to feel better in that she's been a bit calmer in all of her work, and she's starting to explore changing her posture during the work. So this exercise seems to have helped her the most. I've experimented around with different things and putting her in a snaffle bridle and just asking her to walk on the biggest circle possible on the long reins, but a precise circle. So I'm not moving around with her. I'm using the reins to help her equalize her weight, left set of legs, right set of legs. And if that puts the head and neck to the outside like it does for her, then all that tells me is her back and hindquarters are still very skeletally unstable. So there's a lot of movement in the neck and a little bit of outside bend on this long rein exercise if the back and hindquarter, or we should say the spine and pelvis, are not really fully stable. So that sort of pushing on the bit is the first hint that she's starting to want to lengthen her neck. That lengthening of the neck is a spontaneous, dynamic result of stabilizing the spine and the pelvis and the body weight more equally, just left to right, not even front to back or up to down, just left side, right side, creates a release of not only the neck, but that's a whole chain of muscle and soft tissue from the skull all along the spine, all the way back to the tail and surrounding the pelvis. So in this exercise, and after we have been, sort of treating her for her liver being way off, she's finally more consistently, I wouldn't say calm, I would say less explosive, less anxious, right? If she does trot or call or have a meltdown, she can. She has trotted and she has cantered and she has had meltdowns on the long reins. And I don't stop her. I don't help her. I just let her rip and wait for her to walk again. But I'm having more and more sessions with her where she might holler like she just did, but she doesn't act out on it. She doesn't increase her anxiety energy, and she doesn't really speed up a lot or break the walk. And she just seems to be able to cope with everything a little bit better. She's not what I would call calm, and she's definitely not what I would call stable, even in the walk. But this is where she's made the biggest improvements, so we've just kind of stuck with this exercise, letting her get better and better at it every time. And she seems to get some relief. Like, even though she looks underweight, she's eating more than I've ever been able to get her to eat before. But the lack of weight gain can also be what we call hard keepers, can be chronic muscular tightness. And that's what I think it is in her case. So just in the 20 minutes we're going to do, just to the right, all of them pooping right in front of the camera today. They must have had a powwow and a discussion about timing their poops. So I'm just going to move over a little bit. because I'm filming all 3 updates today on the same day. This is what I've been working on with all 3 horses primarily. And all 3 of them decided they're going to poop at the camera today. So my little train of thought just derailed. Oh, I know what I was saying. So while she's going for this 20 minutes, it's not unusual for Rarely to look like she gained a little weight during the training session. And her not putting on weight, even though she's eating more food, more fat supplement, more food than ever been able to feed her before, both of those things sort of tell me that I'm not seeing a horse that's necessarily underweight as much as overly tight. And the blowing, the fact that she gets a little more accepting of the work session by session, the attempts at sort of lengthening her neck, changing her posture, all of that tells me that what I can't see, which is the stability of the spine and the pelvis, is starting to take shape. Right? So especially when she can lengthen her neck and not have an outside bend, or maybe even stay in the posture of long and low and slow, that would be her making the first major improvement to her physical coordination. Right? And she has known pain issues, she's had some illnesses, she's had bad feet, she's had a lot of setbacks. But I'm really seeing those attempts at lengthening her neck, the little bit more calm or less explosive session by session, even on a windy day today. This would have been a good excuse for her to trot or canter or holler for her friends or have some kind of meltdown. And she's really not. She's still a little distracted. She's obviously bent to the outside. Part of that is her choice. Part of it is me supporting the stability of the pelvis. I have to pull that outside rein. And in order to stabilize it, it takes so much outside rein that it's sort of partially creating that outside bend. So some of it is her distraction. It's where she'd be looking anyways. And part of it is me shortening up and putting tension on the outside rein to the point that it kind of pulls her nose to the outside. And I can feel the difference when she's pulling on me or when I'm pulling on her, but it's very hard to see in the video. But long story short, that outside bend of the neck is always there when the pelvis is still not stable left to right. So when the bones of the pelvis and the bones of the spine are too mobile and they're sort of shifting left and right, that's why horses either over curl the neck, put their nose between their front legs, bend the neck to the outside, or stick their head straight up in the air. That's why. And what that means is there's a boatload of weight on the front legs, but we don't see it like we sort of can see it in long and low. We know they're heavy on the forehand. But that outside bend, the neck straight up, or the neck over curled, especially with a dropped pole, tells you the same thing. The back and hind quarter is not stable, there's excessive weight on the front legs, and the horse is trying to do the best they can by holding through the neck. Okay. So we're about 10 minutes into it, and so far she hasn't broken into trot or canter, even though the wind picks up now and again, she's hollering for her buddies, and she used to use any excuse to break into a trot or a canter. And now she's sort of thinking her way through it. So I call that a win. I call that a huge improvement for where she is. And even though physically she's looking a bit worse, mentally and emotionally she's starting to show signs of improvement. Right? And she's happy with this particular exercise, the lengthening of the neck or the attempts like that. Even those attempts at doing that tells me physically we're also on the right track. We're getting some of the changes that we need for her body to heal, for her body to get more comfortable, for that chronic tightness to start to become chronic suppleness. Wouldn't that be nice? and she will look a whole lot better as her balance changes and also as her blood work gets back to normal. We're just about out of the woods on that, but I hate to say that because shit can always go wrong. So that's 10 minutes into it. We'll give her another 10 minutes on this direction. I don't think I'll film the other direction. You guys kind of get the idea. And all I want to see is more and more of that. I want to see that voluntary lengthening of the neck. And she kind of snatches the bit or pushes on the bit. She speeds up her walk a little bit. So letting go of those tight muscles is not easy for her. So she picks up a little bit of speed when she lengthens her neck, and she sort of pushes on the bit, kind of roots a little bit. And all of that is just because as she's going through this change of coordination, the pelvis and spine are just stable enough that the muscles want to let go. But as soon as the muscles start to let go, the bones are not able to maintain that same level of stability. So it's a back and forth between the bones stabilizing movement and the muscles stabilizing movement. And that's why I help her on the long reins, because I can equalize the weight left to right, which is how we stabilize the bones. The more stable the bones get, the less the muscles have to work. The less the muscles have to work, the more supple they become. And that feels good. So the horses always kind of love the work, because suppling muscles is just a good feeling. Tight muscles are what create discomfort and even pain issues. I should say overly tight muscles. So there's kind of an ideal amount of tone. Oh, there's another blow. That's a very good sign. Oh, 2 blows in a row. That's her feeling some physical relief when they blow like that, or they yawn, or sometimes they have to stop and think. They look like they're falling asleep. All of that is showing that she's releasing long-term chronic tightness through her muscles, which tells me the weight's getting more equal left to right, and the bones are feeling more stable through the back and pelvis. So it's sort of a whole chain of events. And to help her find relief and comfort in motion, right, all that tightness that makes her look like a hard keeper is just telling me that her skull, spine, and pelvis, the midline or the central skeleton of the body, is not stable. I don't have to see it, I know it, because otherwise she would not have such severely tight muscles through her neck, back, and hindquarters. And she wouldn't be as anxious, she wouldn't be rushing, because there would just be no need. She would feel comfortable and safe in her own skin. So this process is, to me, the most interesting part. And I never know how horses are going to kind of go through it. I never know a time frame. It just happens when it happens. But as long as I'm seeing voluntary sort of dynamic changes in the right direction, which in this case would be anything that starts to look like long, low, or slow, anything like that means we're starting to really make some headway in changing a long-term habit of coordination into something better and more comfortable, and also something that will support her healing, right? So being in this state of anxiety, rushing around and being that tight muscularly, it sort of goes hand in hand with the fight-flight nervous system being dominant. And that's going to just further release stress hormones, and it inhibits the lymphatic flow. The immune system sort of shuts down in the fight-flight nervous system dominance. The digestion is suppressed. Like a whole chain of events happens with whichever nervous system is sort of in charge. So the rest and digest nervous system, which is what I just call the learning frame of mind, right? That means the parasympathetic rest and digest nervous system is now running the show in there. And even during strenuous activities, the parasympathetic being in charge, but the sympathetic regulating things like sweat and heart rate and all that, that's called cohesion. So I want either a clear dominance of the parasympathetic nervous system, which is what we did in basic handling, but in groundwork, I want nervous system cohesion. How do I know when she gets it? The energy is calm. She starts focusing more on what we're doing and less on where her buddies are. She starts to show self-control over movement and self-regulation over behavior. That's how I know, right? And then the posture, also that high-headed, frantic posture, is part of the physiological response to fight and flight, that flight and fight nervous system, right? Grazing is the posture of rest and digest. So when she's still sort of anxious, looking around, still tight and tense, still a little bit quick, still succumbing to her emotions, all of that tells me she's not in cohesion yet. It's still a bit of a process, and she's definitely not able to sustain the grazing posture during motion, right? That can have to do with her physical coordination, but also her emotional mental state. So we just have a little under 5 minutes to go for our 20 minutes. And you can see, kind of at the 15-minute mark, she finally starts to settle. She finally starts to focus even more. So this improvement that I see after 10 or 15 minutes, again, this is just confirmation that the strategy I've chosen, big circles, at the walk, on the long reins, with a snaffle bit, all of those details are helping her come out of at a better place towards the end of her work, no matter how she starts off in the beginning. That's what really confirms that the strategy we're choosing for training is working for the horse, right? It's not a matter of getting the horse to do the strategy we choose for some random reason or because an expert said or a book said. It's like there's always a path of least resistance where the balance can improve either in the mind or the body or both. And that's how I would adapt my strategy, sort of seeking, letting the horse tell me where that's going to happen the easiest. Not that it's going to be easy, not that it's going to not require a boatload of repetition and time, but wherever I start to see glimpses or hints of calmer energy, more mental focus, a change of posture, even if it's not balance, it's no longer upside down. Long and low would be the opposite of upside down. So I would be happy with the opposite imbalance for now. And anything where I see she's sort of moving that direction, as long as I keep seeing her move in that same direction, I don't really need or want to change from what's working for her, right? Some people get impatient and they go, when are we going to do trot or canter, or why don't we switch to in-hand work or hand walking or lunging or to carpentry lunging? And I go, well, because it's working for her. So if it's working for her, it's working for her. But I want to give her time and repetition. And if it quits working for her, if I quit seeing improvements session by session, then I'm going to start exploring again and checking out different strategies, trying different things, kind of like I did with Hercules. And without that experimentation and observation, we're kind of guessing at what the horse needs in training. But the horses will happily tell us if we pay attention by making the improvements that we're looking for, even if they're slow, even if they come and go. When they're voluntary, we're getting the changes internally that we're looking for long term. So I think I'll wrap it up there. She's still yelling to her buddies, but you can see now the neck is consistently longer. The walk is a tiny bit slower. She's sometimes, with her ears half out, that tells me she's paying attention to what she's feeling inside. When the ears go back to the other horses, she's not thinking about what's going on the inside, she's thinking about her buddies, right? But the ears half out sort of tell you the horse is internally focused, which is what I love to see, because once they're paying attention to how they feel, they pretty rapidly start to improve their coordination and their balance. So that's lovely. And typically with her, we do 30 minutes one direction, then we switch and we do 30 minutes the other direction. So I think we'll stop there for the video so it doesn't get too long. And that's the update on Rarely Wrong for right now.